Top Game with your host, Sammy Castro. Episode 9, Master Sergeant Samuel Octavius Carter, a.k.a. Morpheus Windu, 2651 OccFld Specialist, Certified Game Changer. Admin note, at the request of the guest, please direct your attention to dodstem.us. At that site, you'll get a fix on a wealth of information regarding programs, scholarships, and internships targeting grades K through 8, 9 through 12, undergraduate and graduate studies. STEM programs such as these are critical enablers to the Corps' mission, requirements, and technological superiority in the future operational environment. In the words of Top Carter, step up. Disclaimer. The views and opinions expressed on Top Game are those of the producers and or the guests appearing on the program and do not reflect the views and opinions of the United States Marine Corps or the Department of Defense. Thanks for tuning in. I think it's fitting that I'm sitting here in your house drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah.
Put your headphones on. And for the record, I'm going to state this unequivocally. When Sam Carter makes the Kool-Aid, what flavor Kool-Aid is it?
Man, that's black cherry.
Black
Lemonade
cherry.
right there.
I was a big fan of Purple Source Rex coming up.
Yeah, man.
But Tropical Punch was my thing. So how you feeling?
I'm good, man. No complaints. I mean, it's a long week. It's always a long week, right?
Right.
Every week is a long week.
I don't think there's any easy weeks, right?
Man, I don't make them no more. I wish they did, but they don't. But there's nothing to complain about, though, man. It's honest work, right? It's good work.
So, I really didn't get to know you except through reputation, and some of the guys that were close to you. I started to get close to them only after I got selected for Master Sergeant and found my way out in the middle of the Pacific. And but from the jump, I mean, I could just tell that you and I were going to hit it off. And you know, one thing I wanted to say to you up front was the amount of enthusiasm and support of anything that I've ever pushed out for review or consideration. You've always been 100% behind, and I appreciate that. Because I will tell you that stepping up into that Master Sergeant realm it is daunting, right? And then when you see that the efforts that you've been putting down are resonating and being picked up by your peers, it's validating, and I appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
But let's get into Sam Carter. Where you from?
Originally from Opelika, Alabama, man. Right outside of Auburn. Grew up in the South till I was 8. Moved up north to Gary, Indiana, right outside Chicago. And I enlisted from a little suburban area, Maryville. It's right outside of Gary. And man, I was on ever since, man. I mean, I think I was kind of conditioned to be a part of that move, right? The transition, because, you know, even as a kid coming from the South, I moved a lot. Every 3 years I moved, right? So me and my moms moved in with my grandma, moved out, moved in, moved out. And then we moved up north to Gary. And that was an adjustment. Then we moved around a lot there. Then End up landing up in Maryville before I enlisted. So every 3 years, I was always moving up to that point.
Single parent home?
Until we moved north, and I met my pops.
Okay.
Right? My stepdad adopted me, my dad. And me and my brother, he adopted both of us. And
it's just the two of you?
Yeah. Oh, he had sisters. I mean, well, we had sisters. He had daughters. Ends up being like the four of us. Should turn it off. In the house, any given time. And then my brother, he had sisters on his side. So our family, it started with me and my mom's. I was 8.
And then it grew.
And it just exploded into, all these siblings, man. It's like a total of 9 of us.
Who's the oldest?
Me. I mean, my godbrother Rocky is the oldest. But I always tease him, because like young at heart, man, I'm the oldest. But Rocky's the oldest one out of all of us. Totally. But
what'd your mom do?
Mom's was a teacher, man. She had me. She was.
Why does that not surprise me?
Yeah, English teacher.
I married a teacher. That's why I say that. And I can honestly say that she's been one great influence upon my boys.
Yeah, man.
Liz is a go-getter.
Mm-hmm.
Always has been. And it's funny because I just think I just mentioned to you that we moved off base to get a spot out in town, and there's a process, and you go through the housing brief on Wednesday, and then you go find a house and whatnot. But I went through my housing brief, took the letter out to the agency, and came right back. Maybe an hour and a half later, I had my lease ready for review, and the lady was like, "You just had your housing brief this morning. How is it you got a lease and you found a house already?" And my answer to her was, "Ma'am, I have an aggressive wife." She started laughing because she happens to be the wife of a master gunnery sergeant out there, and she said, "Yeah, it takes a good woman to keep up with you." Mm-hmm. So tell me about the woman who keeps up with you.
Oh man, I keep up with her. Monica's, I would say, about 4 times smarter than me any given day. She's a psychologist. She works at Fort Belvoir.
Okay.
And I mean, I think one of the things that really sparked a moment with her, it was our first date, man. We were sitting there and we was having a conversation. And we were just talking casually. There was no qualms, there was no expectations, there was no, neither one of us was trying to play the game. We wasn't playing a game. We had seen enough at that point in our lives. We knew enough to where it was, we just gonna have a very brutal, honest conversation.
And how old were you at the time?
We met 34. I want to say it was 34, man. We met 34, 35. 34.
What rank were you at this point? You were gunny at this point? It was kind of late in the game.
Man, I had gone through some failed times, man. Didn't quite work out, you know what it goes back to? And I think Kevin said it best when he was talking about when you put it all in, you give it all to the core. I gave it all, dog. I didn't look back, I gave it all. So, I can't blame those failed relationships on the people who I was with because I didn't give them everything. I didn't. I gave it to the core. I mean, because I believed in, what I was doing. I was excited about what I was doing, And it was fighting a chip on my shoulder at that time too, right? So...
What do you mean a chip on your shoulder?
When I came... So I lap moved. I'm a lap mover.
I did not know that.
Yeah, man.
From what?
I was a radio operator in artillery.
Okay.
That's how I started my life. Clicking radios, like when... my time frame was when the Prick 77s transitioned over to Singars, right? The Prick 119s. And that was a big thing, right? Like the Prick 104 clicking at, Yuck 7, Kick 13s. I knew that. Like, that's what I could feel better than anybody, right? I could treetop an OE like it was cool. But, I wanted a challenge, man. I wanted a challenge. And where I ended up at was teaching McMap That's what I ended up in. I did McMap for about 4 years. I got lucky enough to get sucked into that one.
Yeah.
Highlight of my life, right? That was one of my favorite times in my career. And we fought all day long. I get to wake up, we PT, we work out, we fight. We'd all go eat lunch, and then we'd spend the rest of the afternoon fighting. And then as soon as we finished, we work on curriculum or work on a course or whatever if we didn't have a course on day. It was a beautiful time at that time. And then 9/11 hit. Wow. So when 9/11 hit, we all reevaluated what we wanted to do. A lot of us was like, hey, man, we're going to finish up our tour here. Awesome.
This is at the Mace?
This is at the Mace. We finish up the tour here at the Mace, and then we're going to go and teach defensive tactics at the FBI, right? That's because we would work with those guys sometimes whenever we had an opportunity, or we go up to DIA up the street, or DEA, and work in that space. We felt like we had that connection to do that, but 9/11 hit, we all reevaluated, maybe, what do we want to do? And it didn't take me long to looking, moving, lateral move process. That's just kind of how I started. One of the guys in my class was a guy named Sam Patterson, we call Psycho. Sam Patterson was, he wasn't in my squad, but he was in a squad over. And he overheard me and a couple other guys talking about, what we wanted to do, and just overheard it. And he was like, hey, man, you kind of want to interact with some of these spaces. You ever heard of 2600? I was like, what's that? He was like, just look into it. Just check it out. I was like, but what is it, though? Because, I got a plan in my head. I got a plan. He's like, sure, man, go check it out. Well, sure enough, out of pure curiosity, while he was still in the class, I went and talked to the monitor, because I was up for orders.
Who's the monitor at the time? This was in the 2600 monitor?
Yeah, I want to say it was Russman. I think Russman had just took it. I want to say he just took it from 3. And I just let him know, I was thinking about re-enlisting instead of getting out, but I wanted to look at what options, and I noticed that the community was open, right? You had some spaces, and I wanted to know more about it than what I was reading on, from the career planner.
Right.
And he talked to me about it. And he initially talked to me about 21. And I was like, yeah, it sounds interesting a little bit. Before he asked what I did, like, take a test or whatever, take a D-Lab. Like, what do you do? What's your background? I was like, I've been punching and kicking for the last, 3.5 years, but, I used to run radios. And he was like, yeah? You ever heard of a 51? Like, no, I've never heard of nothing. That's what I'm talking to you.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about it, and I was like, it's interesting. That sounds like something I could do. We talked a little bit more. I came back, and I talked to Patterson, found out Patterson was a 51. I was like, yeah, man, let's talk about this. And he was just, Psycho was always a straight shooter about everything. And he talked about the opportunity, the challenge, what you get exposed to, and then your options. And he was straight up with me. And we stayed pretty close after that, too. And it was like, hey, try it for a tour. If you don't like it, it's not like any of this stuff is going to, run away. You still have these opportunities. And one thing that sold me on it was, talking to Russman, is if I crossed over, I was guaranteed to get into something. I wasn't going to be stuck home. Oh, yeah. I was getting into something, And I'm like, well, this is my ticket if I cross. And I crossed. Everything changed after that. And the people to receive me on the other end were a completely different group than I was expecting.
Yeah. It's like that first album that NWA did without Ice Cube. Yeah. You're always into something.
You're always into something.
Yeah.
Man. And that was a transition too.
So when did you find yourself on the poster for McMap? How'd that come about?
Man,
because I don't know if everybody knows that, but that's like, I heard a lot of Marines say that's a SIG enter.
Yeah.
And to put it in that perspective, like, when it comes to hand-to-hand combat, we got a part of the geek squad out there as a poster child for it. Yeah. But you had those, you acquired those skills before you moved over, but you obviously retained them. Otherwise, they would not have brought you back in to do that piece.
Yeah.
How'd that happen?
All enough, the poster worked out real weird, man, because we were teaching a squad, right? We were running an MSgt course, and we were running a drill. I think it was drill day. So,
and where were you at the time?
I was at the Mace.
Okay.
It was one of the last times I was at the Mace.
So before you moved over?
Before I crossed over, I was still there. And that was one of the last courses I ran. We were doing an LZ0, and the boss came out, and he was like, "Hey, I need you to run from LZ, not to go to LZ6. Take your squad to LZ7." Now, TBS is kind of set up very differently now because they have all the new buildings, but the giant field that sits right in front of Raymond Hall was a open field and no buildings sit on it. So that was LZ6. Across the way in the back where the road to Upshur starts was an open LZ. That's LZ7. We did a lot of the hard, insane, like long drills on LZ7 because it had the backyard without a lot of visibility. And then we did the fancy demo. We knew people were going to watch, and so we'd have an audience stuff on LZ6. And he was like, "Hey, take the boys to LZ7." And I'm thinking, well, why? Am I in trouble? Because that means I got to run this drill with the boys. Because every drill we ran, we had to run with them. So I was like, what did we do? That's what I was thinking. He's like, yeah, just go. MSgt Urso at the time. And we ran, man. I ran over to LZ7, and me and the other guy, Scott Magnus, had his squad just standing out in the middle of LZ. And there was a trailer out there. And a couple of cars pulled up. And nobody's really talking to us. We're just standing there, and we got a squad of Marines. Everybody's just trying to stay hydrated because, they're getting prepared for their drill. So it's like, whatever time they can kind of wait and stretch, stay warm.
Right.
It's kind of quiet. Me and Magnus have no idea what's going on. And then a captain comes out from the office, and he's like, "Hey, we're here to take a couple of shots of you guys. We got a couple of poses drawn up, and then we'll let you go on about your way." And me and Magnus were completely confused. "What do you mean shots? What's going on?" I'm kind of confused. So Magnus is the guy that's holding the belts out like this.
Okay.
He had to take that picture, and me and one of the other instructors were there heckling him the entire time because they were spritzing him with like fake sweat. He had to sit and do curls like every 5 minutes, and they take pictures. Oh, we were out of control. We could not. There were a bunch of sergeants, right?
Right.
We could not stop. So they finished up, and he was done, and we were getting ready to turn around and head up because they did a couple of photos of guys doing techniques in the back, so we assumed that was it. And they was like, no, we want you too. You need to take a picture. I was like, what am I supposed to do? And he's like, you're throwing a punch. I was like, okay, I can throw a punch. No. They wanted me in a full Karate Kid split, doing this punch with my hand on my hip, my arm out over top, screaming at the sky. And I was laughing. I was like, I'm not doing that. I was like, that's not reflective of our program. I can't do that. It was like, well, Sergeant, I think you were told that this is what you're doing. I was like, if this is what you're asking of us, we have to be true what's representative of the program. I think a lot of us were like way cocky back there too, man, because we were just, we believe in this program. We really believe in it, and we can't falsely represent it. So, we were campaigning to kind of change up that pose a little bit to be something that was more realistic.
Okay.
And that's kind of how, I managed to move my legs closer together from a full split, and I bring my hand up instead of having it all the way down at my hip and screaming at the sky. But that, once it was all done and we finished and we got back to the office, the captain was like, hey, we're not going to be able to use any of this. So you guys don't worry about it. So we never got notified that any of those posters were ever printed. We were told they did not make the cut. The first time I saw that was a year later. I had left the Mace. I had just finished MOS school down in Pensacola.
Okay.
And I was a holdover waiting for my PCS state to First Radio because I was supposed to go to Hawaii. Hawaii had collapsed and went to California, and I'm trying to get to the new First Radio. There wasn't too many slots for me.
Yeah, so a lot of Marines nowadays, they get that story kind of second and third hand. but you were there when it happened. So would you mind kind of explaining? Because I was at Second, America's Rap Band, when all that was going on. So it was kind of transparent to us, other than the fact that we had to figure out who we was talking to. Yeah. First, third, the artist formerly known as First. So what was that like?
I can't speak for during that time of what it was like in the unit in transition. I know the fallout of trying to get in the unit while it was transition. Like, so that was a challenge because I wanted to go to third. Like, that was any and everything I understood about, well, at the time it was First. I wanted to go to Hawaii. I wanted to go to First Radio Battalion in Hawaii.
Right.
Everything I knew about what I wanted to do and be a part of, everyone sold me on First Radio Battalion. It's like, that's where you need to be, right? Mainly because I guess Russman was, die hard in that game. And, Pat was a West Coast fan for his time in the SSCTs. So, even as Hawaii was moving to Cali, it was like, that's where you want to go. So I'm like, all right, these guys are the experts, that's where I want to go. And then Russman had to change my orders. And he sent me to 1MEF. I was like, well, while I'm in 1MEF, I should be able to get to Radio Battalion, right? And that didn't necessarily happen that way.
Yeah, because we got guys at the MEF
that did. So
are not part of the Radio Battalion.
So what I got exposed to, as soon as I got to MEF, I didn't even really unpack any of my stuff. I just literally, took off my alphas, put camis on, got all of my TAPS gear, and went straight to Iraq 5 days later. And that was my experience of, then 3rd Radio Battalion. Once they had, moved the flag, changed the flag, 3rd was in rotation with 2nd back and forth.
Right.
1st was doing prep to get themselves ready to get in the country. And I was interacting with those guys. And that's how I I got exposed to some of their talent there. That's when I met James Watkins. And one of our smarter 51s, man, that dude's solid. Like James, really showed me some stuff while I was out there. But also, I ran into part of the indoctrination that I will never forget. One Ben Bradford at the time. Okay. I think Ben was a staff sergeant. So Ben was in Fallujah. Mike Ayer was in Blue Diamond. I had interacted with these stronger personalities in our community, and it was a challenge, man. It's like, this guy coming in, and he's a lap mover, and he's a McMap guy. Like, what is he gonna learn about this? Right. This job isn't easy. What do you know about this?
Step up.
Yeah, it was always that. Every day was step up. I fell underneath a guy named Hutch before he introduced me to church. All very, very strong personalities, and it was, only sharks swim in this water.
Yeah, we talked about that a little bit earlier.
Yeah, man.
And to kind of bring that back into focus, we had come to the conclusion that in this game, you got to keep moving. Because if you stop moving, you sink. And the cats to the left and right of you, he sees you down, they'll chew you up.
Yeah, man.
So what do you do to keep moving?
I honestly, somewhere, and I'll be honest, sometimes I don't think it's healthy. I mean, me and John talk about it all the time. I have an insatiable thirst for knowledge. Like, I consume information like it's ridiculous. I want to know what's current. I want to know what's active. I want to know what's practical.
So why do you consider that to be unhealthy?
Because sometimes I can take it too far. I know it. I can take it too far. And I'm more conscious about it now than I was before, because I can consume a book a week, easy. And I can be in the process of reading 3 books at one time, watching YouTube videos, listening to podcasts, just getting to what's current, playing on my computer, signing up for online classes and taking a course here and there. Like, the amount of wanting to understand, like, that can consume pretty much all your free time that you can devote to other things, just wanting to understand. And a part of that was like, I want to make sure I'm catching what's relevant to feed back into the community, feed back into the job, make it worthwhile to set the other guys up for success.
So that seems to be a mindset that you've adopted over the course of your career. But as evidenced by the household that we're sitting in, the home that we're sitting in.
Yeah.
You made a transition into not only marriage but also fatherhood late in the game. So how has that impacted your that operational, that insatiable mindset that you've adopted over the course of this, your entire adult life, and now you got these two beautiful children looking at you and pulling on you.
Yeah. That's how I unplug. That's how I unplug. It's so easy, man. Like me and John, John Scoggins, Juan Grande. We went pretty hard on this.
Juan Grande.
Oh yeah, man. Big John is, I tease him all the time.
The man on fire.
Yeah, he is a man on fire, dude. Me and John put some hours in on this Future Force thing, and the when I mean some hours, man, like, weekends, nights, for a while, trying to make sure it was right. Trying to keep competing with resources to make sure we had the alignments right. We had the people we needed. We had the work roles identified. Nothing was ever perfect, so we had to go back and not really redefend, but validate the justification for making those changes, or see if any other requirements for competing against existing resources. It was work, man. But the one thing that I would say for me personally, I probably could speak for John on this, one thing that carried us through that is whenever we came home and whenever one of the kids stood in front of us, turned it off. It was off. I didn't even think about it, man. I pick up Elijah and he starts laughing.
Right.
That's it, man. There's nothing else in the world that matters. And then once he goes to sleep, I can think about all the other stuff. So that has given me another outlet.
Right.
Because before, when I would obsess over, trying to be the best at it, like put in the work. I always believed that hard work beats talent when talent refuses to work hard, and I felt like I could outwork any challenger you put up against me. I'll outwork them. Any obstacle, I'm outworking. It's not even a doubt in my mind. But then you can take it too far, right? So I had to build outlets for myself to decompress that. Now that I got kids, I don't have to build an outlet.
Right.
I just go hang out with the kids, man. Every day.
She reads to them.
I do.
What do you read? To them.
To them?
I see your bookshelf here. I can see everything you read.
So all their books are downstairs. So we've been lucky enough, like a lot of families giving us some of the kid books, you know. Dr. Seuss, we got pretty much every Dr. Seuss book ever written. Like any book with a I love books with a story. Okay. Like I'm very into the narration of a story. So, one of the books was I forget the name of it. Oh, the Places You'll Go.
Okay.
And I love to read that to him because I would read that book to him when he was still in Monica's belly. When he was still in the womb, I would read that book. Oh, the places you'll go and the things you'll see. Oh, the places you'll go. And then when he was born, I'd read it to him again, and we would decorate his room. And I think I was reading the book one day to him, and he recited that we had gone past the page. Right? I was on the 6th page, and he just bust out, "Oh, the place you'll go," and I'm like, "Yeah, man, yeah, absolutely." So,
I was always a big fan of the Eric Carr books.
Yeah,
The Hungry Caterpillar, The Very Busy Spider.
Yeah,
The Very Quiet Cricket, The Very Lonely Firefly. We used to read those books over and over again to the boys. They're older now. I got 16 and an 11-year-old.
Mm.
My 11-year-old's reading at a 11th, 12th grade level. 16-year-old, and we're studying philosophy together. And I think I mentioned it in a previous episode. He's with Sergeant Moreno. Right now we're on moral relativism. And the search for whether or not there is a steadfast right and wrong, good and evil. And it is founded on the impact that the book written by Cormac McCarthy had upon me, called The Road.
Mm-hmm.
Have you read that one?
I haven't read it yet. I've heard a lot about it.
So, essentially, to kind of summarize it up, in the most dire of circumstances, a father and son must traverse from point A to point B with all kinds of wickedness surrounding them. Mm. And there are several key points where the son asks the father, "Are we the good guys?" Mm. And the father, without hesitating, says, "Yes, we're the good guys." And, we'll never do bad things. And the father, he lies to him. He says, "No, we'll never do bad things." But, we all know that under scrutiny, each of us is capable of some of those shortcomings, right? Mm-hmm. But the intent of the father is to teach his son, first, to not only carry on without him, but to do so and maintain that fire inside of him, that moral code, that understanding of truth and good and kindness, compassion. Yeah. And so I ask you, what do you point to, or what do you plan on pointing to when your son asks you, "Are we the good guys?"
Yeah. Yeah, man.
Because he's talking now.
Yeah, he is. Yeah. I imagine my son's going to ask me all the questions that I would assume I'm unprepared for, right? Like, because you're talking to another human being. And he's going to come to some conclusions, and he's going to want answers. And he's going to want to try to understand it.
Right.
So, I want to point to him and say, find your ground, find your feet, find your identity. Stay on your toes, don't feel on your heels. I want to give him the lessons that I can remember from my grandfather. Right? When I look at the great patriarchs of our family, right, and my family, my dad was solid, right? He came and adopted me and my brother, so I'm not going after that. But I remember my grandfather had some lessons that have carried through the generations. And one of those lessons was specific to how do you keep your family together? And, he had a huge family, had 13 kids, 6 wives.
Wow.
And whenever we had family reunions, the wives would bring the kids over at the same house because they understood exactly what he meant about family. They may no longer want to live with him, but they did understand the importance of bringing the family together. And, he was the approachable one. And, he had the wisdom of the entire family. And, some of his lessons were very specific, easy to translate. Be honest with people. Just be honest. You don't have to be an asshole. You don't have to be.
Right.
All you have to be is honest. You don't have to be contentious when it's unnecessary. Just be honest. You don't have to hide from people and feel self-conscious. Hide behind honesty. It's more transparent than anything else. Like those were his things, man. Stand up, lift your chin when you talk to people. Don't put your head down. There's nothing to be ashamed of.
Right.
So I think of those, right? Those are the lessons I want to be able to transmit back to, my son. Like, man, there's a lot in this world that the world can hold against you, but don't allow that. Don't even let that feed into your psyche, man. It's not even worth your time.
I had a situation in MCT, and I don't remember if George Garcia remembers this or not, because we were there at the same time.
Yep.
But we were doing line training.
Yeah, man.
Before MCMAP.
Did some of that.
And, growing up with my father, he was a sheriff's deputy for a hot minute, and when he was going through the police academy to get his what they call TCLEO certifications, where all the law enforcement officers have to go through.
Yep.
he'd come home and we'd ground fight, and he'd practice some of those joint manipulations and submission holds on us.
Yeah.
It wasn't jiu-jitsu. It wasn't McMap. It was, just the bare minimum, but a lot of it's related.
Yeah.
And so, it were things that just became second nature to me, because when we moved the coffee table to the side and we got down on the ground, it was on.
Yeah.
And for me, those are some of my fondest memories.
Yeah.
When my dad would take his glasses off, and you hear that sound when he puts it on the table, right? And he'll mess up his hair, and then let's go, come on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you quit, you quit. Okay. And that's kind of carried on today with my boys and I.
Yeah.
In the general art. But one of the things that those lessons have brought to me was that, like you said, you say what you mean what you say. You stand on your own 2 feet, and you find a way to walk proudly in this on this earth for the time that you're here. And in the middle of line training, I was working with my partner, and the technique that we were doing, he wasn't executing it perfectly. So I was showing him that there's a way in which I could get out of this if you don't apply the pressure appropriately. And this corporal, who from jump seemed a bit off to me. I guess he got a little bothered by the fact that we weren't sticking exactly to the program. And he's like, "Oh, you think you know this already?" I said, "Well, no, but I know this piece." And that's just what I was explaining to my partner. And you have to remember that out of the 100 or so people that were in our platoon at MCT, I was the only Lance Corporal. And so that puts a target on you. And I'm okay with that. But so then he pushes my partner to the side, and he wants to square off. And it got physical. And I got the best of it. Or I should say I gave the best of it. And the staff sergeant that was in charge of that platoon, our platoon commander, when the dust settled, he was they were going to charge me. But I had 2 sergeants, both from Texas, and one of which was a scout sniper, Sergeant Bolus. And he pulled me aside and he told me, he says, "You have to be really careful, Castro, about how you engage with senior Marines. But we're men first before any of that. And, our rules of engagement are clear wherever we go, that you inherently always have the right to defend yourself. And if a man puts his hands on you, as was the case in this instance, I expect you to defend yourself." And it was right in line with what I knew growing up under my father's roof. But it's one of those things that have kind of always stuck with me, is that, and especially during Krulak's era, when there was this sustain the transformation and pushing these core values and on top of that, creating a cognitive advantage for us. The strategic corporal in the 3-block war, the ability to transition on the fly between those environments. And one of the key tenets of those pieces put forth by Krulak was that the Marines come to us with some amount of conditioning, training, background, and it's not all going to be the same. And so that's why there was a kind of a leveling function. And at that point in time, the drill instructors were dropping off their covers and having core values time, and they were shooting straight with you. And I enjoyed that piece probably more than most of boot camp, because I thought that's when it got most real. And I think it's a vital component of what this podcast has become. Because there's no drill instructor covers between you and I. We're not even in uniform. We're just, two men with a mic between us and sharing experiences and stories. But, I want to ask you, what was the transformation for you like when you crossed over from that environment with all the strong patriarchs that you had? And believe me, I had them too. How did you translate those lessons into your experience in the gun club of ours?
I think it was kind of goes back to a conversation I remember having with John, man. Like, when you're a kid, especially like a teenager, I'm thinking like, your sophomore, junior year, you have some lessons that you understand that's true to you. But then you have lessons you remember from your old man that you didn't give credit to. Like, you don't know what he's talking about, right?
Right.
That's not my age, right? He doesn't know what he's talking about. Like, I know the world. I'm 18. I know, that level of pure ignorance and arrogance. And I think my transition into the gun club was, I can still remember some lessons in boot camp of, I had a lot of anger as a kid.
From what?
Just angry little dude. I think my anger was, compounded with a whole bunch of just stupidity, right? Like, if you don't have, like, different dynamics feed into a healthy environment in your home, and you have some stuff that's kind of like feed negativity, some people take that out differently, right? I took it out with a lot of in-fed anger, right? I would turn inward, and that was like how I dealt with it. And then, it was hair trigger stuff. I'd end up in a fight, or I'd end up, in a contentious situation with somebody that didn't necessarily need to be. And but I was a class clown, right? I was always joking, telling jokes, laughing, and socializing. So it was almost bipolar sometimes, where I'm laughing, I'm joking, but then somebody would hit a button that's just a hair trigger for me, and I'd set it off. I carried that into the Marine Corps, and the Marine Corps was, way more over the top than I was. The drill instructors were 10 times more bipolar than I could ever. Right. And I'm using bipolar
not in the clinical sense.
Not in the clinical sense, because my wife would clown me on that, and she was like, "That's not what it means." But those lessons I ended up carrying over, man, was true to me when I had to reflect in scenarios where I remember something he said, and I'm in that environment right then at that moment. Boot camp, MSgt school, and I'm thinking, I thought I was the tough, quick, kid willing to stand his ground, and this is something I've never seen, and the only thing that I can think of to describe this is something my dad said to me like 4 years ago, and first lesson he gave me was, be honest with your friends, raise an eyebrow for all your new ones. And his whole thing was that, the people at heart that are close to you. But as you grow friends, just be conscious. Try not to be blind. I didn't really know that, right? As a kid, like everybody that you cool with are your friend. Everybody you socialize with is your friend. And the first lesson of learning is like, not everybody's your friend. Right? And I learned that in 29 Palms and Comm School, in Riverside at the club. We all went to a spot with a friend of ours. My brother he got a car, and we went to I'll never forget. My friend used to call the cat named Compton because he was from Compton. So he took us to Compton. We was in L.A. and having a good time. And, we stayed, part of the weekend. But one of the spots on the way there, we went to Riverside before we got to L.A. Go figure, right?
Okay.
Because that's the way you get to L.A. You go to Riverside first. Because you had to go to Club Metro at the time. And, one of the guys that was a friend of a friend of a friend, so obviously he had to be my friend. I was supposed to ride with him, and he left me. Right. So I'm stranded, in the area because this cat was, chasing some woman. And, I'm in a situation where, I'm by myself. I don't have a car. I'm in an area I don't know where I'm at. So I'm really conscious of the situation. Like, this isn't right. How did I get myself in this situation?
Right.
Because I could end up in a bad place, and I got no help.
Easily.
I got no help. I got no way to... We didn't have cell phones back then, man.
No.
So it was like, I don't even have a landline to call because I wasn't smart enough to write down the duty's number to kind of call back. I'm that guy. Like, all I can think about is I'm going to end up on that report, right? Come Monday morning, they're trying to do the call, right? I'm going to be the guy that's not reported. So I'm UA. Luckily, they came back and swooped me up, but that was the first one. That was the first time I learned that lesson. I ended up learning it more than once, but that was the first time I learned that lesson. I started remembering some of the things my old man said over the years.
One of the things my dad taught me was you can walk away from a fight once. And after that, you got to stand your ground. And I've taken that and I've interpreted it as it's more than just a physical aspect, right? And sometimes, in this world of ours, especially in the singing game, you get a lot of opinionated characters, and sometimes it behooves you, right, to de-escalate it when feasible, when possible, in order to remain focused on the task at hand. But occasionally, you just gotta let it go, and go to the mat, so to speak, and so, I was talking to John Scoggins over the past couple of days quite a bit about just that very thing, because in some of his interactions over the course of this tour of his as the OccFld Specialist, he's adopted, in his own words, I got him on tape, a very aggressive approach to verbal confrontations, and he's made it work. But in the same breath, he's also stated that it's probably not the best approach. And one of the call-outs that he made was the fact that you seem to have that ability to succinctly articulate in a non-aggressive fashion your position in order to kind of sway the conversation and the tone of the discourse to keep it civilized. What are you doing when those things are taking place internally? What's the checklist that you're running through? Because it can't be just, I'm just going to roll through this. It appears to be, without seeing it happen. And I will state that I've seen you engage in guided discussion, but not heated discussion with anybody. But even in guided discussion, it's readily apparent that there's an organized and efficient path that you take when you're explaining something, particularly when it comes to the ISR data engineer and the futurization or the modernization rather of the 2651 MOS. So what are you doing internally as you're going through that process? If it's in a heated disagreement, or if it's just in a careful calm, explain like I'm five fashion?
So I would say it's something I picked up from people. I picked things up from people, and I internalize almost like leadership style. Like, how can I employ that in my own, communication tactic? Because, John doesn't give himself as much credit as he should when it comes to how he conveys his arguments. Because, I tease him and call him like a machine gun because he's always stacking rounds.
Mm-hmm.
John can litigate an argument better than most lawyers. Like, if you get to a topic that he has rounds on, be prepared to stand right. You know what I mean? Because he can put them down range, man. And it's data facts. It's data-driven facts. He's not putting down opinions. He's not putting down conceptual ideas or hearsay rumors. No, man. The dude does his research, right? He looks it up. He talks and gets feedback. Like, so I've seen him eat up audiences just of someone just trying to come over the top. But I think what people miss is what he does to stack his rounds. And I've been able to be around him to do that. He takes input from everybody.
Yeah, he mentioned that. Down to the Lance Corporal. Everybody,
man. He absorbs everybody. And he's stacking rounds. Because someone will come to him with a factual statement. And then, and I'm not just saying a factual statement, like, hey, it's this. No, they will propose an argument, or this is what I've seen, this is what I was experienced. And someone else will end up confirming it, not knowing the other person just told him the same thing from a different argument. And he'll evaluate that against the facts, and he'll vet that around and see what people think about it and see if it makes sense. And he'll stack that. He's like, hey, that's a useful argument point. That's something to evaluate. And he'll look at the metrics of, looking at the data of manpower and what he has to evaluate it. And if it's good, man, he just loaded a magazine on you.
It's like a high school debate.
Yes.
Team captain just stacking index cards.
Stacking index cards, man. He's like Eminem stacking raps, just waiting for a battle to go down. And John's good at that. So, I absorb how he analyzes data because he's very specific about moving out opinions and conceptions. It's more about how he understands that argument. And he stays away from things that he hadn't stacked rounds on, which is smart. I pulled some things away from Kevin Simmons. Like, Kevin has a very, very, very crafty way to use language as a weapon. If you cross into the lane, the lane of something that he's gonna fire on, and he's quick, right? So being concise, articulate with your argument instead of talking around it. And I'm wordy sometimes, so you'll have to forgive me. I'm not nearly as clear and concise as he is with his arguments, but I understand that the meaning to be articulate with your point, being very direct, being very precise. And I take some stuff from Nicole. Like, Sean can be combative when he wants to be.
I think the word I used was abrasive.
Yeah, man. He can throw bows, man. He's a pugilist, right? Sean can be the Steve Bannon of SIGINT if he wanted to be. You know what I mean? He could go after it. But Sean is also good because he does something, the people are not paying attention to is if someone says something he's unaware of, that's a factual statement, he'll listen. He's not, he doesn't turn his ears off. That's a misconception. He never turns his ears off. So he'll poke something to get something out of people. He'll prod at people to ruffle their feathers to get something out of it. So how does that, all of those things to include, how I've obsessed my years of studying martial arts and trying to get out to how I articulate about this community. I knew for a fact going in, not everybody was going to buy into ISR systems engineers. I knew people, when I started talking about data engineering and data wrangling and software application development, security stuff, not everybody's going to buy into that. Because it sounds nice, but what does it mean? And I made a decision not to go into the argument trying to pick a fight. Because the reason why people wouldn't buy into it is because we haven't talked about it and very few people understood what we're trying to get after. So it was my responsibility on myself to educate what we worked on. Because it wasn't. I mean, there's another assumption that this is the Sam Carter plan. Ha! I mean, I'd be honored to take credit for all that, but I can't. It wouldn't be fair to the people that helped put this together. This started about 10 years ago, man. I mean, we got real momentum back in 2009 when Mark Montebias was the SEI comms chief, and Stewie Ikea replaced him, and Vic Church and Roger Esteban. We were all like trying to set up meetings to try to figure this out. Mike Ayer would call in, Leif Lander would call. We worked on this pretty hard, and we made some progress and fell back. Made some progress, fell back. So this has been an ongoing thing. I mean, hardcore for 6 years, but the ideas of this started almost a decade ago.
So, what is a systems engineer?
So for us, like a systems engineer is a call out, right? So there's Easter eggs and everything I'm getting ready to tell you.
Oh, I fully expect that.
There's Easter eggs and all this stuff.
Which is why I think it's great that this is going to be recorded in a fashion that will allow it to be scrutinized. Just like you mentioned those Eminem battle raps, right?
Yeah.
I don't like this note.
Yeah.
They're going to eat you up.
Yeah, of course.
But you've already done the homework, so I know you're not concerned. Yeah. But please.
Yeah. So what do we remember about like 51s in the beginning? A lot of that was defined by SEI comms. And that's what everyone saw. Factual data that the vast majority of IMOS does not live in the radio battalion. Most people never knew that. When you look at
I've come to learn that late in the game, and having more 51s around me than I've ever had before has brought to the forefront of my brain housing group of how unique that role is within not only the SIGINT community, but also within the overarching intelligence enterprise.
And we left them hanging because for years, the people who have participated in the TNR conferences, the OAGs, the CCRBs, the learning analysis, all the structural Marine Corps processes that take to make change and impacts Corps and OccFld have been people from the radio battalions. So has always been the only tactical skill to capture. So the intel battalions were kind of left out. No one addressed them. SSCTs were forgotten. SpinComs didn't exist, right? Like these are the things that happened to in a community. So one of the things we named it was to identify the entire community that's doing that. I got away from system administration because the system administration role is, admin accounts, does the printer work? Is the coffee machine kind of plugged into? Can some of the guys fix some of those things? Yeah. Is that their full-time job to make sure, like the printer has paper in it and the ink cartridges are full? It's like, did we spend this much money on these Marines? That's the only thing that they're responsible for. Or can we train that all the way out to all the things they're capable of doing? Because I wanted to capture is we had pillars, right? We had 1 or 2 Marines in each unit that held up the entire infrastructure for that organization because they taught themselves SQL, they taught themselves Oracle, they taught themselves Solaris and Unix. So they were the single point that could pretty much fix the server whenever the servers went down. And it was like, what exactly are they doing to fix the server? Because it wasn't just rebooting reactivating the domain, right? It wasn't just reconnecting a domain controller. It wasn't like flushing out the directory. And these cats were doing some deep dive analysis of what was happening, of how the data moved between 2 systems. And that's where we started getting to the level of engineering. Now, if I'm trying to compare like an academic term of systems engineering, like taking systems apart and rebuilding them from scratch, yeah, we had guys that did that. They did that, but unbeknownst to most people in the community. We had Marines that did it. So I went after those individuals. I said we need to create more of those. These 1 and 2 and 3 people in each organization that's holding up the entire infrastructure. Those are who we're going after. We need to build them. And I can remember going back and forth with some of my peers about, can we build them? The reason why a lot of these cats can do what they do is because they taught themselves coding on their own time. And they spent, obsessing over SQL and MySQL and NoSQL and those databases. Like they understood the idea of data flow, of how data moves between different systems and can impact the congruity of one particular database, right? Like if it's not absorbed the same way or inputted, it won't be extrapolated in the same quality. Like they did that on their own. No one taught them that. So because no one taught them that, it can't be taught. I mean, that was the argument, right? That was the opposing argument. Not thoroughly disagreed. And, over time, we all talked about like, nah, we can build people like this. We just have to train them that way. So that's where the engineering comes from. That I wanted them to understand. You need to understand your data, your systems, your environment at an engineering level. So if the lights turn off, you can rebuild your architecture from scratch.
Right.
Systems is a play on words, my Easter egg, right? Systems thinking. It's not systems technology. Systems thinking. I want them to view all their problems in a systems thinking approach. And it's if you're thinking in systems, a router routes or it doesn't. Because one of the things you have to think about is your function in your environment. What's the function of it? Not necessarily what is it capable of. What is its function in your architecture? You can have a radio. Your radio could be a transmission device. That's what its function is in your. Or it could be an encryptor. That's its function. Or it's a router. That's its function. Or it's a switch. That's its function. You can only view your equipment, your resources, if you're thinking in systems to look at what they're capable of and what function you need for it to work at that time. So when I say systems engineering, that's what we're getting after. And then the ISR piece is to cover the whole gamut. It's not just SIGINT.
Right.
That's it. It's not just SIGINT. You should live in every environment. You need to partner with GeoInt dudes to understand what the geospatial imagery, topographic community has of value to the SIGINT community that the human guys are trying to get after. So when you're talking to an also analyst, you know where their gaps are, technology-wise or data-wise, so you can make sure that they're asking you for the plugins. ISR. It's the only way to capture that. And then you understand that all this information feeds a customer. It's not just feeding internally. ISR is an asset that informs operations.
Right.
So
ideally.
So you have to be a continuity. You have to be a conduit for that. You have to partner with your 6, your comm guys, and your 3, the IMO dudes that's trying to figure out what's feeding into the COP. You can't have a planner that's afraid to go engage the IMO team about what the COP picture looks like, because you have to have Intel input to that, Intel support to that. ISR systems engineering, baked it all in one shot.
So I guess my question is, who trains these cats?
So we indoctrinate them to a lot of the language and lexicon at school.
And it's a loaded question because I just sat down with some of our representatives from Goodfellow. And boy, they're having a hell of a time, Sam, getting instructors out there.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want to air anybody's dirty laundry, but you got cats dropping papers avoiding that schoolhouse.
Yeah.
And for me, I see it on both ends. On one side, it's good because if they ain't got the stomach for this fight, as we modernize and prepare for a kinetic fight, we're probably better off without them.
Yeah, I think part of that, yeah. I think another part of it too, is we've thoroughly under-supported our schoolhouse as a community. We fed into the narrative that it's miserable to be at the schoolhouse. It's miserable out there. When some of that scuttlebutt start matriculating, out of the schoolhouse, and they've had their own challenges there trying to get their resources together to kind of put this out. But the one thing I can say, the Marines there have done a lot of work with what they've been given. and they haven't been given much. So, going back to that first question, like, we're teaching them the new wave tops in the entry-level school. That new course they just built, ISEC, or ISREC. I keep forgetting how it's covered on the formal manual. It's a new course. They're teaching new stuff there. It gets them started. And if I could take it back to some of the NCOs that I got a chance to work with when I was at the radio battalion. One of the guys there was we had a really good cadre of Marines there teaching our Tier 1 cycle. I remember telling you a little bit about it. And a lot of that informed what we were trying to do across the community, because the Marines said very specifically, when the guys we're teaching right now finish their deployment and they come back with that experience and then they become instructors for this cadre, they can produce an even better product, because not only will they train differently, they also have new experiences to add on top of that.
They employed that training.
And they enhance the quality of education. And Sam, I ain't gonna lie to you, man. I was blown away what those boys did. Blown away. I can't take credit for any of it. The John Green, Sam Cohen, Ken Welch, Cardenias, these are NCOs, right? These are Lucas Winchowski. These are dudes, these are NCOs that took it upon themselves to build out the content for this curriculum. Only thing I did was facilitate a schedule and make sure we had chow, water, and a corpsman. But the idea of that was, all we had to do was start it. All I had to do was put a loop in so it feeds back into it. By building out that first course, we got a foot in the door that once those guys go out, they get to their units. If the leadership properly employs them, then they'll feed back into that cycle. And some of them will eventually be teaching some of this stuff that we're talking about. That's a long way from now.
Right.
That's a long way from now. But it's understanding the long game to get after the short game. So my short game is we have to change the culture in the schoolhouse by adding the structure we just did. And we did. Or at least we were going to. There are people inbound this summer that can help that. Like, one of the guys that I personally worked with before is Rick DeVera.
Okay.
Gunny DeVera out of PAC.
Yeah, I've met him a couple of times.
Aloha Rick is a studied personality. He's a fun guy, but he studied. When I mean studied, is Rick reads. Like, he doesn't miss much. And he stays engaged on what's going on. And the one thing I think is going to be good for what he'll bring to the culture there is he can easily lower the stress of an environment. Because it's like, you can wind the clock and run people about 16 hours a day, but you don't do that for so long.
Right.
You got to get back to when you're having a good time, you're tackling challenges and smiling about it. Like, when it's a happy, miserable point, he knows how to do that. He knows how to bring people back out of themselves and enjoy what they're doing.
It's an art.
Not everybody has it. Not everybody can do that.
Yeah, we had a on the back end of a conference that took place in person. I was out at his spot. We talked at length about San Angelo, Texas, and I explained to him. I said, look, there's a lot of bad information out there about San Angelo, Texas. But I would tell you, for me, directly after 5 years at Radio Battalion, to go there and be close to family, but not too close to family, gave me an opportunity to really become close with my family. And there were certain unforeseen life events that had I not been there at Goodfellow in San Angelo at the time, it would have been rougher than what it had been.
Yeah.
And I had the good fortune of a phenomenal chain of command out there that got behind me and supported me in the most challenging of times for me personally. You know, my father passed away from a unexpected aneurysm at the age of 50. My leadership provided me as much space as they could legally to take care of my family. And just recently, I was listening to a podcast, and one of the guests on this podcast said that the ideal place that you want to be as far as the character development and who you are as a human being is you want to be the most dependable person at your father's funeral. And when I heard that, I made a sound that was not voluntarily emitted from my mouth. You know, because I know I was that, but that's not enough, right? I mean, you keep moving, right? See previous statement, keep moving. Where to go from there? Well, prior to executing PCS orders to the Dominican Republic, at that same location in San Angelo, my wife was diagnosed with breast cancer. You know, and you got your queen, and you got your beautiful children, and you know what it takes to provide this home for them. I don't know if I could do it without Elizabeth. And fortunately for me, the leadership there at Goodfellow, and by extension, the entire community there at the detachment, the guys to the left and right of me, I mean, solid dudes, guys like Zach Ensminger, guys like Chris Taylor, Nick Watson, Kyle Boone. I mean, the list goes on and on. Guys that you know, as instructors, you're no longer in the OccFld, but you're there making a legitimate impression on the future of the OccFld. And there was a level of camaraderie that we enjoyed that I think is probably going to be hard to duplicate ever, because there were so many of us, you know, staff sergeants and gunnies right there in the same spot, and you know, with a lot of same experiences. But you know, they circled the wagons around me, and they were there for me, and during both time frames. And you know, for me, that time in San Angelo, which initially was I personally greeted it with a lot of frustration because it's not where I wanted to be. I saw it as being put on the bench, but that's not the case. You know, that time will probably be one of my best, you know, duty stations in the Marine Corps, and I would never have guessed that going into it. Yeah. To the point that I even had to call the monitor who sent me there, Joe Black, after the fact, and explain to him I needed to be here for a reason. I appreciate, you know, you having the foresight to send me here, even though I wasn't happy about it. But to the point, one of the issues that was brought up was, or I guess kind of RFIs that was generated was, how do we incentivize that schoolhouse tour? And you know, some of the talk was you make those individuals exempt from being histed. Okay, but that really only gets you so far. Yeah.
We have tons of ideas about this that we're kind of toying with. Just to kind of echo your argument, man, I think one of my most satisfying tours was when I was teaching at the Maze. Being able to impact, I mean, that's a rewarding feeling. So right. I don't want to second guess that. I mean, think about this. We're getting ready to build out like 2, possibly 3 more courses at the schoolhouse specific about the 51 modernization. Not even counting what's happening with the 29 and the 91 stuff. This is going to be an excellent schoolhouse to be a part of for what we're moving across. But a lot of that stuff has to be built, and building it from the ground up, that means you have your hands in the foundation of building a castle. Like that in of itself is I don't even think I have the words to describe the value that will feel for anybody that's participating in that. But some of the things we've kind of toyed with, man, and we're kind of playing around with, we wanted to get back into the beaks and having like, you know, instructor certification program to almost like internships when guys get there, you know, they'll spend their first year, picking up that degree or, going to, work in a research facility that's specific related to what they're training, just so they get that exposure and experience. And then they come back, teach a little bit, and then get back into, some research. So it's an ongoing experience while they're there.
So like just spitball some of the venues you're talking about engaging these Marines.
So what I wanted to do was, San Antonio State, right, or San Angelo State, they have I want to say it's a data science curriculum that they already have.
Yep.
What we toyed with, and we still kind of playing with the school, with the leadership there is, guys would apply to this program, right? We apply to be a part of this program. Your payback tour upon completion, after you finish your bachelor's degree in data science, computer science, network engineering, is your payback tour is at the schoolhouse. So you go there, but instead of being on the instructor BIC, you're on the student BIC. So that first year, you're a student. You're a college kid. You just go into campus, knocking out your classes, finishing your stuff. You graduate, you hit the podium, you get to teach, and then you get to work out stuff. Another thing was, I'm really into trying to get this internship professionalization program off the line. Is like the last thing I want to go. I really want to get this, and I haven't really advertised it yet because the timeline of when we'll be able to do it or how I'll be able to do it, I haven't really pushed it out. But hey, it's public.
Breaking news on Top Game.
Breaking news. We for the last year we've been working on a 51 specific internship program, and how to go about it. Either certifying it with one of the CSA partners, one of the agencies, or, getting something exposed to with an industry. We've partnered, established relationships with Amazon. We have feed-ins to Spark, Splunk, Google, and a couple other companies that are willing to participate. And we just need to define what those lab opportunities would be. We talked about some education programs, so not just agency work role certification, but like, getting your undergrad or grad almost like NIU. But if you're not going to NIU, where are we going? Because maybe I don't want strategic intelligence, but I do want, data analytics engineering at George Mason.
Okay.
Like, how do I get that? So if I get a master's in data analytics engineering, okay, fine. Your payback tour is teaching a 59 course. That's your payback tour. A lot like we had the internships, your payback tours at the battalion.
And this includes the 2651s and the 2611s?
So I can't touch 11s, right? The idea of what they're going to be exposed to, I'm not sure yet. I don't know how that's going to work out.
Okay.
But I think for the data professional, I'm not expecting it just to be 51s. I think the data professional, I'm focusing on the 51 quotas within the program, but I think it's going to be open up to a lot of people because analytics is going to apply to everybody. Think about it this way. How many 29s will be a part of EW planning? It's going to be a lot of those guys, man. I mean, a lot.
Yeah.
I mean, a lot. So between the 29s and the 91s, some of those 29s will be, there's value of having some background in fundamentals and analytics. Not just going to Mark and doing A&R, but like understanding, what business analytics applies to the current data space when the data metrics from the EW spectrum environment is going to be heavy, man. It's going to be heavy. And if it's going to be heavy, it's going to be convoluted with, intel, non-intel information, like publicly available information. How do you bring that stuff in and make sense of that? We're saying like that doesn't matter because, EW is not related to intel. I was like, you're missing something. I'm just talking about sensitive information. Right. That's anything, that's everything. There's on the back end, there's somebody trying to figure out how that works. So that also means I would expect some of my GeoInt guys to have value of this as well. I've been really been intently about partnering with them as we progress in this space, because no lie, these guys have been down this line. Just as long as we have, trying to professionalize that workforce in this environment, in the data space. So those are 2 features or 3 features I'm thinking of we could do to add some incentives, right? Education opportunities, work opportunities, industry opportunities, like all these opportunities should be available to that instructor staff. We should think about enhancing the quality of our instructor staff.
Right.
Going to instructor staff should be like, all right, you're joining the professional, MMA team, man. Like, that's the team. So if this is the team, we're going to invest in the trainers. We're going to invest into your nutritionists. We're going to invest in to make sure you have a masseuse on deck. We have to invest in a team. And I think we that's when I went back to, I think as a community, we haven't invested like we should have. This gives us an opportunity to do so.
Okay. But yet and still, they're going to have all the same requirements as any other Marine. So PME, and they won't be exempt from that.
Yeah.
CFT, PFT.
Absolutely.
Get some.
Yeah.
And I guess that's where we lose a lot of them, in that they would rather just do the work as opposed to doing it in uniform. And that makes it difficult, because not everybody can do both, right? There's not everybody can do just the data engineering, systems engineering piece, mm-hmm. but then to throw on the additional demands of wearing our cloth, it takes a special type of individual.
Sure, takes a Marine.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And so, what do you say to those Marines that are kind of on the fence about whether or not they got the substance to stick it out?
Yeah, I would say they're missing something. I think that this is what I'm gonna put on the leadership, right? So we need to write leadership in these environments to bring that right narrative to this message, because this is leadership saying that you can't have tactically and technically proficient people. You can't be a programmer and be a Marine. You can't be a data engineer and still want to bark every once in a while, right? That's leadership. And I would say to anyone who's challenged against that argument is sit next to the guy that had to hold a sniper position, for 10 hours. All right. And then sit next to the guy who had to hold cans and concentrate for 10 hours. Then sit next to the analyst that was under pressure because they were under 2 operations at once, and they the senior analyst of that watch floor for 10 hours. And then sit next to the programmer writing code for this one piece of app, one piece of software, whatever, right? All 4 of those Marines, every last one, are like fully invested in performing that job. All of them, man. Every last one.
Right.
They're all Marines, though. And one of the things that gives them that fortitude to be able to concentrate, put forth that effort, focus, and drive past that level of misery is because they stomach the misery in other places and other points in their lives. You don't want to take that away from them because that adds value from them. But if you make it a distraction, as in like it hampers your ability to do this, it harms, it takes time away from your ability to do that, it's leadership failure. You be distracted away from the quality of it. Like in that case, hire contractors. You don't need Marines.
So that's going to be my next question. It's like, how have you been able to circumnavigate around that argument? Because
I can't deploy contractors the same way I can deploy Marines in the same speed. Even if we embed them, right? Even if you embed, like we did FSRs with every, program of record we did bouncing between a couple of countries.
Right.
You limit on flexibility of how fast and how work and how you to change it. FSRs is devoted to one particular program or a couple. Marines 51s, we were devoted on a mission at an organization, regardless of whatever piece of equipment showed up at the doorstep. We just became its owner and we jumped into it. Engineers, we will consume that intel mission. Like you can't contract that out. It's that devotion that the Marines bring to any environment. I mean, look at it. Look at every environment that we've had Marines at, and why have they been successful? Every last one. I mean, every last one. I mean, we just created a cyber OccFld, man. But wherever you sit on the fence of that, like left or right, I mean, I have my own personal opinions about some of the progress, but it's here, right?
Right.
And because it's here, we've slapped the table, it's move out. But why did we create one? Because Marines are successful at it. Why are they successful at it? It actually goes back to the stuff we complain about all the time. Pick the right dudes because we had a community to do it. We identified folks who had the fortitude, the dedication, the devotion to get after it. Because we had the right community and culture that thrives to generate this type of churn. And then we put them in an environment to be successful. We made them miserable. And they teamed together in a good, close brotherhood-like work relationship. And they went after it, man. We do that everywhere we go. It comes with the culture. I mean, look at the dudes that come out of MARSOC, man. The 8071s that show up at our doorstep. Every last guy that come out of there, everybody's like, dude, solid. They extremely trained. They tons of experience. They have a brotherhood there, a work ethic. I mean, a lot of that came with that community and culture and brotherhood that they experienced within those teams and those Marines they were working with. Now one of them would come and use like, I'm special, I'm super, I'm different. You know, every last one of them that said that I've met, I'm a Marine. Good leaders, man.
Okay. So let me switch it up a little bit. I've heard in my travels, you mentioned as having a few monikers. One being Mace Windu.
Oh, God.
Yeah. Something to do with a Jedi course.
Yeah, Jedi course, baby. Yeah.
But the other one being Morpheus.
Oh, man. It's taking it back.
Yeah. So, with that sobriquet, let me ask you, being, as I'm sure you are, familiar with the Matrix trilogy, what do you think is the inherent, not only obstacles, but challenges and pitfalls to the employment of autonomous weapon systems as we move forward? And is that going to have any play with what we're doing with systems engineering?
Of course. Yeah. So, dude, I just gave a brief today about that, about the Marine Corps concept of data intelligence. And, you know, I can kind of talk about some of the things we're getting after because I'm going to publish it in the newsletter. You know, we're getting ready to push the stuff out. So, you know, breaking news here, right? Another one. So one of the questions came up about, you know, automated and autonomous systems. And we get after it specifically about how we're going to approach cognitive computing.
And just to be clear, I'm talking about some of those projects that came out of like Boston Dynamics.
Yes.
And whatnot. So like the Sand Flea and the Big Dog and the Cheetah and I mean, the list goes on and on. Yeah. Atlas is another one.
These amazing systems.
I mean, these bipedal, you know, organisms.
Yeah.
That are doing somersaults and, you know, picking up boxes now, but before we know it, they're going to be.
I would say what we can see is impressive. What we are exposed to is impressive. You know, I would say there's so much more research behind what we, you know, can't even see that underlines even more potential associated to using those in a combative situation, let alone a weaponized version. And if we're not conscious of it, like we have to be engaged in this. We have to be prepared to handle autonomous systems. To either manage them, to support them, or defend against them in any capacity. So wherever we sit on the fence, all of that's kind of plugged into how we handle and manage our data and what our signature management is, which goes back to how we manage and live in a spectrum environment. All of this is tied to understanding our data and our signature and our spectrum environment, our RF environment. And if we're not getting after that, we're going to be lost. So the reason why I said a lot of that has to do with one pitfall that I foresee is not us understanding automated and autonomous systems. They're actually different. Right. So, you know, automated systems can do the thing that they're programmed to do really well, and that's good. And they can do it unsupervised really well. Autonomous systems has a decision matrix. It has a decision framework. It can decide when it wants to do, when it needs to do, based on different behavior patterns set within the algorithms. Those are two totally different functions. It requires two totally different systems to feed it. It requires two totally different data metrics to feed that, to make it work right. We need to be prepared to make sure we're either feeding a healthy data diet to one of these systems, so it's, you know, it's doing exactly what we want it to do, Or we need to be conscious of, like, if an adversary has an autonomous system aimed against us, we understand what's feeding it. Is it our signature that's feeding it? Then we have to change the way our signature management framework is being done, because the sin flees out of control. I mean, there's more, right? The nanobots and some of the other network swarms that, you know, we think of swarms of building, I won't say building, or flying lights, right? Or flying designs in the sky when you have 20 bots that look like birds and they just kind of fly and then they move around. Well, shrink that down, man. Shrink that down to the size of a bug. And then, you know, have that, a lot of more advanced technology feed into that. That's still a data metrics. That's still a data framework, because they're sharing signals between each other. And we need to have some understanding of how that works, either to enable to employ it or not. And these are the things that's in the concept of data intelligence. Like, we need a better understanding of that.
Right.
And I want to feed a lot of that into my 59s. I'm expecting 52s, 53s, and some of our analysts, you know, 21s, 31s, O2 31s, you know, GeoInt guys, to understand some of the analytics of that. And I want my guys to understand the data metrics of that. What we envision 59s feeding into 2602s and 91s and 0291s is saying that we need to have a strategy associated to this environment. And this is how we look at this as a framework to include that a part of our planning. Now, that's what I foresee as one of our pitfalls, understanding the difference between the capabilities of those technologies.
So one of my concerns, being a little bit one of my concerns is that the amount of information that is going to be generated off of this is going to be so overwhelming. And by looking at the mock, they're talking about employing some of these capabilities down to the fire team level,
squads and quads,
and in that environment,
squads,
in that environment, you're going to start to generate a cognitive overload for that young Marine.
Absolutely.
And so, you know, I've always believed, because it was what I was taught, that as an organization, we don't man the equipment, we equip the man, Marine, and not the other way around, right? So what are we going to do? What can we do in order to generate a cognitive advantage for that young Marine, so that he has the decision-making capability to take all of that information and all of those systems and employ them?
Yeah.
I mean, because for me, that sounds like, you know, these cats that are you know, on these multi-million-dollar tournament esport playing Dota or StarCraft, or I mean, they've got to be making decisions at that level, in order to be
at that speed too.
At that speed, that you know, proficiency, that competence, in order to be successful in the future operational environment.
You called it. Like, so I talked about it today. It was like, cognitive capacity should be a measurable resource, and we talked about how much attention span do you have on any given thing. If we're in a data saturated environment, which we're in that one today, right? It's very easy to, I mean, we talk a lot about fake news. What's fake news? If not noise. But a lot of the noise the more it can flood the zone and overwhelm facts. That comes in any capacity, right? We're going to be in an environment where the battlefield is going to be overwhelmed with signature, you know, data and electronic signature. So if all this stuff is coming in, if each infantry squad has an opportunity to like flood stuff in, and it's like, you know, blaring the zone, like, what is an analyst working on? They can look either direction, and it's just overwhelming information flooding the zone. So if we can measure cognitive capacity, and I'm saying this in a way of, we need to offload a lot of that additional time that we have spinning, tagging, searching, to algorithms, and allow that to help for that. And then focus on filtering, defining our assessments, it'll be a lot easier to make faster decisions. And the reason why this isn't advanced, because we do that today now. We just don't do it in our current systems environment. We don't do it in our current architecture. You pull up your smartphone, right? There are some built-in algorithms that help filter your search when you're looking for certain news, movies, YouTube videos, Netflix shows. Like all that stuff's already built and designed to kind of help offload cognitive capacity so you don't have to think about it as much. Is there potential to create information bubbles? Yeah, absolutely. You can create an information bubble. We're talking about that now, right?
Right.
Like you get locked into those bubbles, and you start believing your own ideas when there's no one countering your likely idea. But if we walk into the door saying that we need repel chutes to pull out of these bubbles once we create them, or it's an automated thing that you get pulled out of the bubble, then we're approaching the algorithms to still offload and gain more cognitive capacity to focus on this. We're not going to, as people, right, expect that we individually is going to sift all through this information alone. We will need aid, but we shouldn't take blind aid. We should understand how the algorithms work, what we need the algorithms to do, be able to recognize and mitigate bias when bias is there, pull the bias out so we can look at it objectively, turn the noise down when it's identified. And then that's how we handle that environment. We can do that now. I mean, that was the pitch. That was part of the proposal of saying we need to approach this as an active concept, a part of McKisery. This is how we're going to do that. And how do we get this into our requirements document so our systems can function this way? And we can start teaching and training that way. We can start going into our field exercises and testing these models against SOPs and TTPs. What works, what doesn't work, what makes sense, what doesn't. Like, we should be active. I don't believe in passivity in this space.
Right. So, what's the name escapes me, but I want to say it's 2.5, but I could be wrong.
You talking about the experimental battalion?
Experimental battalion.
Yeah. Was it 2.7? They're 2.7 now, right? Because 3.5 had it before them? Am I calling it right? I could be calling it right.
I'm playing young Jamie right now.
Nice.
Because I don't want to get this wrong. And the reason why is because I've been in contact with the battalion commander since my time there at 3MEF. But the gist of the matter is that they're test piloting a cognitive gym.
Yep.
And they're calling it the decision room.
Yeah.
Where they've got these young Marines, just like they got a gym, just like they got a library, they can go in there and they can get reps and sets on making decisions under pressure. Now, simulated pressure, but pressure nonetheless.
Still counts.
Right. But one of the things that I've come up against is that it's not a perfect solution because for a lot of reasons, but one in particular is the fact that they're having a difficult time matching the level of immersion that the Marines can experience with their commercial off-the-shelf equipment.
Yeah.
You know, they got their Xbox One X, One S, whatever, or for the PC Master Race, the Ascended ones, they've got their own boxes they built and thrown all kinds of LED lights inside of.
Yeah.
You know, they're rocking a 1080 Ti graphics card, you know, in SLI configuration. So there's two of them and Oculus Rift and just getting it.
Yeah.
So do we have to get to that point in order to make it sustainable and to get the level of buy-in and participation necessary for it to have a significant impact on their decision-making capabilities? Or do we continue to just use the tried and tested method of just pen and paper, not RPGs, but TDGs?
Yeah.
Right. Or some blended model approach that kind of incorporates all of that, and it seems like that's what they're doing, right?
Yeah.
But have you had a chance to look at what they've got going on and if it's in line with what you foresee as being a step in the right direction, or where should we be applying resources in order to do more?
Yeah. Yes, I think we should absolutely move down investing in the simulation space in a virtual environment because it's going to be cost effective. But we have to do it in a smart way because we need practical hand time. Right? We can't take lecture and just assume conceptual ideas. We need to physically immerse ourselves in as deep a saturated environment in anything we need to study as possible. And sometimes we can replicate that in simulated environments if we do it right, if we invest right, if we play it right, if we get after it. We need to invest in that. Like we need to put forth as a community, raising all of our hands. If that's not an UNS, if that's like at any next conference to say, hey, we need to invest in oversaturating these environments so they are as complex and as merciful as possible. I like the idea of that. I haven't seen what they're doing at the experimental time for the tactical decision games, but I've heard about that. Everyone's looking at how we can simulate some of this stuff. How can we extend this capacity a little bit more? And I think that's the way we need to go. One of the things that came up during the brief with DCI was, is this only what we do at some of our formal schools? Or do we open this opportunity to expose Marines experiences in different research labs across the country? Not necessarily like, an internship for 18 months, but you just go work on a project for about 6 weeks, come back. Right? You get to see what those best practices, those business practices. So now we're still in a simulated environment because it's external from the Marine Corps, but it's extremely immersive into the processes of that organization and what research they're involved in at that current point. And then you bring them back. And then you allow them to apply that technology or those techniques against their unit or their organization.
So in 2011, I was still at Goodfellow Air Force Base, and I was attempting to prototype. I call it the Mobile Learning Initiative. Effectively, it was a blended learning approach where I was trying to get more reps and sets out of the Marines outside of the classroom.
Yeah.
And it was difficult because of permafrost, but I was able to get like 20 iPads, about I think 4 MacBook Pros, and we started developing resources and tools to supplement at an unclassified level the things that we were teaching inside the classroom. And there was a bit of some consternation regarding marketing of the actual initiative. So I ended up calling them just basically MTMs, mobile training modules. Yeah. And for the Spanish linguists, I created one about the Battle of Chapultepec and the Los Niños Héroes, the boy soldiers that were part of the academy that stayed to fight against the U.S. Marines there in Mexico City. I did another one about the St. Patrick's Battalion, which was a group of Irish deserters that joined the side of the Mexicans when the U.S. invaded. It's not commonly known. Another piece that I picked up on was on the music associated with the drug trade in Mexico, and how they tell their stories and effectively the corridos. It's a specific type of music, but then within that genre of music, there's a subgenre that focuses almost primarily on narcotics trafficking. I did another piece on the conquista of the Spanish to the Aztecs, in order to get kind of what we were discussing earlier, that foreign language is more than just grammar and vocabulary. There's a cross-cultural competency that comes into play, and you get that in in history and in religion and in some of those other cultural pieces like music and whatnot. And then, staying in tune with the current events. And so one of the kind of tie-ins that I did was there was a doctor by the name of Don Alejo, who lived in this one area of Mexico, kind of in a rural environment. And for those that don't know, most citizens don't have access to firearms because of some of the gun control laws. That may be counterintuitive because of all the gun violence that is taking place down there. But suffice to say that Don Alejo was allowed and permitted to have firearms because he was a hunter. And he was approached at one point in time by a drug trafficking organization. They said, you have until such and such time to leave, and when we come back, don't be here. So he paid all of his employees their severance pay, sent them packing, and he waited. And when they showed up, he had several fallback positions, and he killed a significant number of them before he finally succumbed to shrapnel wounds from a grenade. And they made a song about him, and just to kind of paint a different picture outside of just the normal news for the students, so they get to firmly entrench themselves in that aspect of the target language and the target culture. And then when I approached the training development element there at Goodfellow, one of the things that I had asked about was kind of like a flyover view of the organizational structure of some of these violent non-state actors in Latin America. And how do we kind of articulate to the student, this guy has this role and this is how much money he makes and this is what this is his TE and he may have this TO underneath him as manpower structure at his disposal in order to engage in a distributed operational environment against the same analogous elements from different violent non-state actor groups that as they contest for territory. And they said, well, we can't really, the level of development that you're asking for, we can't provide internally without modifying some things within our contract and whatnot. But if you fill out this form and it gets approved, then at that point in time, they'll shop it out to see who can satisfy this requirement. So what does Sammy do? He takes that form, he goes home. I look at it, pour me a nice glass of whiskey. And it's like, well, instead of just like a diagram, let's turn it into a force-on-force video game, right? But one of the problems with that approach when we go into model and simulation is the fact that we inherently start to take the broccoli ice cream approach. Broccoli's good for you, and ice cream tastes good. Mash those together. There's your answer. But it doesn't necessarily work like that. And one of the requirements that was levied upon me as we were developing this game, it was called Sicario, was that we had to inject a question and answer session at the beginning of every round. And effectively, the game played like Risk, but with with hero units and troops. And so the idea was you had to control different areas of the map that were strategic points. So we call them plazas. And then, you want to get the sources of the narcotics and ensure that you've got your market, be it in Texas or Arizona or California or New York, Florida, whatever was locked on. So you had to have that entire product cycle, that product chain intact. And if your adversary could disrupt that, then it would, kick off a penalty to your earnings, which then translated into less forces capable of being employed. And as I started testing this with the Marines, one of the things that came up was, man, if I say this city or this state, they know exactly what I'm talking about because they've internalized that spot because of the fact that there was experiential learning taking place in that they physically fought over that territory for 15 rounds against their barracks mate. Mm-hmm. And so for me, the takeaway was there's value to this, but we got to be very careful on how we employ it because otherwise we could just be throwing money at a false solution.
I think there's extreme value to understand the quality of like gamifying a point of education, so you can use a point of education, so you can use the incentive-based model to over-engross information, and then like you surprised like how the reps happen. Like it's all based on reps. It's all the repetition, exposure, and then incentivize of how excited you are doing that, how much mental arousal you have during that time to kind of absorb that information. And that's adult learning, right? That's the neuroscience of it. So being able to gamify those scenarios is extremely valuable in this day and age, and we need to invest in that. We need to look at it. What you're talking about, everything you've just laid out in that description is something we could wholeheartedly learn to take against a lot of models of training that we already have. We haven't looked at it that way. You know, one of the things we were talking about, like the generation of people, like a lot of discussions about like how do we approach millennials. I was just reading an article a couple of days ago, and I brought it up, you know, during a brief. Are we really talking about millennials? We're not anymore. The next generation of this article talks about the network generation. That's the people we're recruiting now. Those are the Marines. That's the portion of society at the 20-year gap that's coming into the Marine Corps today.
Right.
And they grew up internet. I mean, information was readily accessible, at a touch of a button. So the net gens understand gamified logic, right? They understand it well. They've been playing video games as long as they had the strength in their hand to hold a smartphone and start moving around. So they thoroughly understand that. That is easy for them to digest, consume that information fairly quickly that way. Being able to gamify the logic. And then, we talked about like how do we communicate. Millennials make up the majority of the Marine Corps now. I mean, that was the argument in the paper. It was like when you do the analysis of what age range makes a millennial, then you look at what is the average age of the Marine Corps. Like when they were born. Right. Percentage goes, we're over 60 to 75% of the Marine Corps is millennials. I think we fall into that middle ground between, right. Generation X and Generation Y and millennials. So I think they call us Zennials because we're around before the internet, but we also were there when the internet and smartphones kicked off. So we're kind of like that in between, right. Whatever.
Sweet spot.
We hit a sweet spot. But I say all that to say is like we should gamify things and we should be afraid of it and we should think it's stupid. And I think that's some of the dinosaur in us to look at, gamifying scenarios and thinking, do we need to make everything a video game? We need to make it tough. We need to make it realistic training. Right. We absolutely need as much realistic training. Get into some of the cognitive decision space, though. Being able to expose this stuff in a simulated environment so we have more people exposed to it for cheaper cost. Right.
So,
dude, yeah.
General Sealy sent me to ITSEC in Florida in 2011, and at that conference, one of the things that I saw that really kind of caught my attention and said this seems to be an approach in the right direction. They had developed an application that allowed them to replicate the dimensions and layout of a shoot house, so that as you got teams stacked up ready to execute their CQB reps, they're land up on their iPads and they're rehearsing, right? So that because you can only run so many people through the shoot house at once. So the other teams, and as they're in the shoot, waiting for their turn, they're getting their reps in right there on the fly. Yeah. And so as soon as and if the shoot house reconfigures itself to mode 2, 3, 4, whatever, then they can go to that function on that app and be able to do the same thing. Oh, and by the way, they could do it before and after their day at the shoot house.
Yeah.
And that seemed to be a solid approach as well. But one of the things though that seems to be confounding us in the development of these tools is the fact that we don't have platforms with which to develop them on.
Preach.
And we I submitted a draft proposal a while back, and I appreciate your support of it. But I'll tell you that it never got funded. And what we were trying to do is create an innovation and disruptive thinking laboratory to allow these Marines to be able to develop these tools of their own free will and volition to exercise these self-acquired skill sets and put it in a creative capacity towards a problem set that we as a Marine Corps face. But to give them the ability to make the determination of what that was going to be, provide them some mentoring, provide them some guidance, point them in the right direction. Look, here's the FOE, here's the mock. Look at this Frago. This is what the Commandant's saying. He's asking you to do this, and I'm telling you that I'm going to support you and champion your efforts, but you need to step up.
Yeah. Yeah. All we have to do is move out of the way. I mean, if we just move out of the Marines' way, these guys are going to succeed every day of the week. I mean, that's what Marines do. I think the thing we have to look at is, I remember looking at your proposal and thinking, man, that's amazing. So how do we take advantage of that? What are we missing about that? How do we employ that? So in the data concept, one of the things we talk about is platforming, and it's very specific. I call it out line by line, and it's like we need to get away from this idea that we need fixed systems to solve issues. With fixed hardware and fixed software versions tacked on top of a system, and that's a program of record that moves. I understand it's easier to understand that logically from a programmatic standpoint for lifecycle management, but it's an easier understood mechanism in a label of 1920s acquisitions and sustainment. It's harder because it has now birthed us 33 Intel program of records. Why do we have 33? Well, we could have like common hardware of maybe 6 different hardware stacks based on your modular size, and then everything is just software-defined applications for your requirement coming out of a depot somewhere, and Marines allowed to develop applications for what they need. And then if it's an improved software development kit that's already been ground through some DevOps environments, then your DevOps environments have some very strict left and right lateral limits, and they can build apps. Why aren't we doing that? And that was what we tried to call out in this concept. Like, do you understand what I'm talking about? Condensing surface area? Like, I've just eliminated your vulnerability surface point by 50% because you don't have all this left hanging hardware dangling off your network in private VLANs. You don't have 122 applications loaded in your program records that no one ever uses. Like, help me, help you, help me. Like, the money we could save instead of building all these licenses for the stuff we never use, we could just move out and focus on the platform. How do we build out the platform?
Right.
And then load as we go. And then guess what happens when you build out a platform? Things that are being used stays. Things that aren't leaves. So if somebody builds an app and we think it's awesome and no one ever uses the app, then we evaluate. Is it because they don't know it exists?
Right.
Well, it actually is cute but not useful. Is it pretty, but it has no functionality? Pull it off. But that informs the next developers. That informs the other guys that, like, it has to have some functionality. It just can't be pretty in design.
And, oh, by the way, that young Marine that developed that app, he doesn't lose the skill increase, the +1, +2 to coding that he now has within his wheelhouse. And he's the next thing that he builds, he's going to take that feedback, that criticism, and improve upon it.
Yep. And we need to get there in a way that makes sense. When you were talking about that scenario, like that simulated that environment that kind of immersed some of the guys in your program we use in San Angelo, it made me think about a book I was reading. So I've read a lot of Malcolm Gladwell. So I've gone through Tipping Point Outliers, David and Goliath, and Blink. I love Blink. Blink was good. But the thing that I liked the most about Outliers, which kind of answers to what I vision in David and Goliath, is Outliers talks about there's more than just the individuals that are significantly special that pushes them to succeed. And I think a lot of people take away from that because they assume that, he's talking about the 10,000 hour rule as you need 10,000 hours to be an expert at anything. And I think people completely miss the message and everything that's happening right there. Because it's not just 10,000 hours of doing a thing. Part of it is 10,000 hours of doing a thing well, but it's also having a supportive culture, community around you supporting your efforts as you mature. So you have to have that level of support to do that. And that is how, the cream rises to the top, because they do have that internal desire to succeed. They do have that grit. I get to the grit and talk about it. They do have that desire to succeed, and that pushes them through it. The other element that I think is, he really gets after in David and Goliath is the value of adversity. The value of adversity is something that I would say even General Mattis talked about when he was still on active duty, when he said post-traumatic growth. And he had a very impressive speech about post-traumatic growth. And the idea was like, just because people experience war and hardship and stress and hard times does not mean they're broken. It's like, please don't make the mistake that, everyone you assume that actually has, a couple of battle scars, they're weak. It was like, they are stronger because they have made it through that. Like, they have a deeper fortitude than you give them credit for. So he talked about post-traumatic stress, the idea of developing grit. You have to struggle first. And then once you survive the struggle, you have more confidence. And that confidence feeds into your next day of adversity, and you can stand on your feet. And then the next day of adversity, you can walk through the storm. And then the next day of adversity, you're laughing and you're running because it doesn't matter, right? Like all of that feeds on itself. So I think both of these have to contribute to our learning environment. Like we have to provide some level of adversity. It's never going to be easy because it's never going to be easy. And we have to accept that. And we also have to understand we have to have a community of support around these Marines to ensure they grow. We can't just say, you got it, boss, I'm out. It's more of, no, we're gonna build this environment around you. We're gonna make sure the simulated environments are as rich as humanly possible. It's realistic, it's challenging, and as as immersive as we can make them. And we're gonna build reps. You don't like these reps, but you're gonna keep getting them, and they're just gonna keep coming. And that's exactly how we build these dudes, man.
So, let me ask you, in your assessment, with what we're doing here, close to the end of episode 9.
Yep.
What do we need to do more of, or differently, or better, in order to continue to push this message out with regard to motivating those that come behind us to carry the torch?
I think the thing we have to say to ourselves is, what lessons did we learn that we want to teach others, and what do you want to fix? Because let's be honest, right? Lance Corporals, we bitched about everything. We bitched about it. We complained about everything, man. And just like my old man told me, that I learned later in life because I was 18 years old and I didn't give a damn what he was talking about. Lesson he told me is, if you're going to complain about it, you're going to fix it. If you ain't going to fix it, it's not a problem. You can't complain about it no more. So if there's anything out there that those Marines don't like, grab a hold, man. Fix it. Like, stand up, stand in front of the challenge, and fix it. And what did you learn along the way when you fixed it? Did you learn something that you think is even remotely valuable? And if it is, have some compassion and hand it to the next guy, because it may be valuable to him too. Those are the lessons I think are powerful. And the last thing I would say is, never judge a book until you open the pages and you read it. If you judge a book by that first page, you might miss the content that's inside. Read a couple pages.
And with that, we're out.